Nonverbals are anything that communicates but is not a word. The public knows them as body language. How we dress, how we walk, have meaning, and we use that to interpret what's in the mind of the person. My name is Joe Navarro, and for 25 years I was a special agent with the FBI. My job was to catch spies. It was a rarity that a person didn't eventually reveal what I needed to know, because we would sit down and have these very lengthy conversations. When it comes to nonverbals, this is no small matter. We primarily communicate nonverbally. There's a lot of myths out there. The ones that stand out is if you cross your arms, that it's a blocking behavior. That's just nonsense. Even when you don't like the person that is in front of you, this isn't to block them out, it's actually to self-soothe. Because in essence, it's a self-hug. You're waiting for somebody, you tend to do this. The other misconceptions are that if the person touches their nose, clears their throat, or covers their mouth, they're lying. We do these behaviors as self-soothers. And people who prattle that and say, well, we can detect deception because the person touches their nose or covers their mouth, that's just sheer nonsense. Scientifically and empirically, there's just no Pinocchio effect. We humans are lousy at detecting deception. When we study nonverbals, it's not about making judgments. It's about assessing what is this person transmitting in that moment. The first thing I look at is I look at the hair. Does it look healthy? Does it look well-groomed? The forehead is very interesting because a lot of times we reveal stress. A lot of the things that we have gone through life are often etched in the forehead. This small area here between the eyes called the glabella, it's one of the first areas that reveals information to us. Most often when we don't like something, we do that bunny nose of I don't like.
At about 3 months of age, babies are already doing this when they don't like something they're being offered.
We don't really know what our lips look like, and we tend to compress them. When something bothers us, when something really bothers us, we tend to suck them in. At the neck, I want to see if there's any head tilt, because head tilt, the person is more relaxed. The minute the head tilt goes away, there's usually some issue. But I also look for any behaviors of ventilating, because men tend to ventilate at the neck, and we do at the very instant something bothers us. And then I look at the hands. When something's troubling us, we tend to stiffen our fingers, interlace them, and almost like a teepee, we move our hands back and forth very slowly. This is to be differentiated from when we do the steeple, which we do in this position. I'm looking at the shoulders. You ask somebody a question and they don't know, both shoulders shoot up very quickly. When something's at issue, we tend to put our hands on our hips and we become very territorial. But look how it changes when we put our thumbs forward, and then it becomes one of more of I'm inquisitive. And then the feet. If I ask a question and all of a sudden the feet withdraw and are crossed, perhaps the person feels a little threatened by that question. Do I see any behaviors such as wiggling of the feet, kicking of the feet? I look at the legs to see if there's any brushing of the legs with the hands, which is, again, to pacify. But when we try to hide it, then it tells me that this person is trying to do some perception management. And if they are, I want to know why. Espionage work is often nowhere near what we see in movies. And in one of the cases, we had information from another country saying, you have an American we think is actually a mole. He's here working for a hostile intelligence service. And just fortuitously, he was videographed coming out of a flower shop. We're looking at the video and we were saying, well, there's not much there. You know, he's coming out of the shop, getting in his car. And I said, stop the film right there. Just as he came out of the shop, he took the flowers, and most Americans tend to hold the flowers by the stalk so that the flowers are up. This individual took them and held the flowers so that they were facing down. And I said, that's how they carry flowers in Eastern Europe. Rather than confront him about, are you a spy, I decided to do what's called a presumptive. So as I sat there with him, I said, would you like to know how we know? And he had this look on his face, and I said, it was the flowers. And then he confessed. When I came into law enforcement, I thought it was all about the confession. It's really about face time.
There were times when I would look at a face and there was just something odd about it. I couldn't quite pinpoint what I was seeing. And so I began to think about the concept of chirality. Usually in chemistry means that when you fold something over, it looks like it's going to fold over perfectly, but in fact it doesn't. And that's what I found with faces. Sometimes when someone presents in a way that they're difficult to interpret, it's because their faces are actually showing two emotions, one on the left and one on the right. And if you divide the face in half, you'll be able to more clearly see what that specific emotion is.
We're all transmitting at all times. We choose the clothes that we wear, how we groom ourselves, how we dress, but also how do we carry ourselves? Are we coming to the office on this particular day with a lot of energy? And what we look for are differences in behavior down to the minutia of what is this individual's posture as they're walking down the street? Are they on the inside of the sidewalk, on the outside? Can we see how often he's looking at his watch? Can we see his blink rate? I know your blink rate is around eight times a minute, but you don't know that. You're not sitting there counting. All these things factor in because they're transmitting information. Now it's up to us to then use that information to say, okay, we need to marshal resources to be on that individual right now. Poker is an interesting game. The similitudes of sitting across from a spy or sitting across from players, it's their reactions to a stimulus. We have behaviors indicative of psychological discomfort that we use at home, at work, or at the poker table. So we're going to take a look at poker players and some of the body language that you'll find at a typical poker game. This is the first time many of them see each other. This is a great opportunity to be looking for behaviors indicative of discomfort. We're going to see one individual reaching over and grabbing his shoulder. We're going to see the individual shifting in his chair. The woman in this case, her shoulders are rather high. Here we're looking at player number 2 and number 3, and we notice right away that their hands are on top of the cards, and they may do that because the cards have now increased in value. Player number 5 is sitting there, arms crossed. You don't see a lot of activity. That doesn't mean he's not transmitting a lot of information. He holds them very close when nothing's going on. But does that change as the game evolves? Player number 4, she's actually withdrawn her hands from the table because when we like things, we tend to move our hands forward. When we don't like things, we tend to move the hands away. When we look at player number 5, now his hands are fully out. This is as far as we've seen them before. At this point, we know that he's engaged and that he's interested. We talk about nonverbals because it matters, because it affects how we communicate with each other. We are never in a state where we're not transmitting information.